Hey everyone, welcome to the Entrepreneur Motivation Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Bello, and today we've got Bob Wheeler on the show. Bob, welcome.
Hey, Chris, great to be here. Looking forward to a great conversation.
Likewise. And we actually connected on Sharifa's Roundtable show. So it's really cool to have gone on your podcast and also have you here again, because every time we connect, we learn something new about each other. And I know we're going to talk a lot about money and our relationship with money and a little bit about your story and how that came to be so important to you in your life. But why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself real quick for our audience?
Sure. So I'm Bob Wheeler. I am the founding partner of Wheeler Bi, a CPA firm. I'm the CFO of the world famous Comedy Store. And then I wrote a book and created themoneynerve.com, which is exploring money and emotions, because a lot of people make financial decisions based on unconscious emotional triggers. And as a CPA, I kept noticing people were doing the complete opposite of what seemed like sound practical advice.
Right.
And so we do that. And then obviously, as you know, I've got a podcast, Money You Should Ask, again, where we're just having conversations about money, because my mission has been to normalize conversations around money to help remove that stigma of shame around financial literacy, making bad choices, and that piece where everybody feels like they're all alone and that they're the only ones making these bad choices, and somehow everybody else seems to look like they've got it together. They don't.
We're all trying to figure it out.
That's right.
That's so true. Well, welcome once again. It's great to have you here. And I guess, where would you like to start in terms of the money thing? I know I hear a lot of people talk about the money. That mentality comes up from that scarcity mindset, or how we were raised and how our parents always said money doesn't grow on trees. Is that kind of what you've seen throughout your career?
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, we start making decisions when we're 4 or 5 and 6 years old. Like when we're young, we're taking in all the information, and often we're taking it in as fact. Oh, that's the truth. My mom yells. That's the truth, right? All moms yell, or whatever it might be. Sorry, mom. But it's all those things that are coming in, and we're taking them in, and we're not aware that it might actually just be a filtered story, that our parents might have some hangups around money. They may have some issues around self-worth. And so they're projecting it onto us, and we're taking it as fact. And then years later, we're like, oh my God, I have to get rid of all this baggage.
Right.
And again, not to blame our parents, because my parents, like I think almost every set of parents, they go in with the best intentions. Just life gets in the way. It gets a little complicated, and they don't always hit the mark. So it's not about blame here. It's just about understanding. We pick up a lot of information as young children and make them our truth.
That's so true, that we just accept these things to be true because it's all we ever knew, which is what blows my mind the most, of how much impact life and your environment can have on you when you're 4 or 5. I don't have very good memory, but apparently my girlfriend can remember a few things when she was 4. I don't know about you, Bob. I don't remember anything before like 3rd grade, I think, right? So it scares me to think, like, what if something happened when I was 3 or 4 years old that maybe impacts the way that I come and I show up on my podcast, in my business, in my life. And of course, I had a great childhood. My parents are awesome. They're still together, all of that. But I can occasionally remember, one of my parents yelling or not giving me that toy that I wanted because it was too expensive or something like that. And so those little subconscious things could really go a long way in what we believe to be fact, when in reality, maybe it was just an opinion or how they were raised.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're probably in complete denial, and something probably really tragic happened when you were 3. So I just want to name that.
I stepped on a Lego or something and I'll never recover.
You'll never recover. Yeah, I actually do remember stuff when I was 4 and 5. And
really? Okay.
Yeah. And so when I was 4, I remember walking home from school one day in the rain, which felt like 10 miles. Back in the day, it probably was like 2 blocks. But it was pouring down rain. I walk home, the wind is blowing, it blew my umbrella away, all these things. I get home, my mom and my siblings are sitting around the fire drinking hot cocoa. And my mom's like, oh, there you are. We were worried, because I'd been gone like 45 minutes. And I'm like, what? Oh my God, I'm going to have to do everything on my own. These people are not capable of raising me. So at 4 years old, I was already like, I got to do this stuff myself.
Wow. Yeah.
I ain't counting on anybody. So that was a driving force for me, that like, people aren't coming. And it may have just been like they were tired. I mean, there's like 100 things, but I took away from that and made this very strong decision that I was going to go it the whole way, and I was going to do it on my own. I wasn't going to wait for people to help.
Absolutely. And I can only imagine, I mean, we all have such different backgrounds. See, I had the overprotective Hispanic mother, and I couldn't even ride my bike outside of the driveway sometimes until I was like in 8th grade. And she's, where are you going? You're riding your bike to your friend's house 10 minutes away. Oh no, that's too dangerous. You're crossing a major street. So we had very different upbringings in terms of, my mom would never let me walk alone as a 4-year-old through the rain for 45 minutes. And even now, as a 30-year-old young adult, she's still calling me, hey, what are you doing out so late? Or if I ever visit at home, it's interesting just to see, they try to take overly good care of me. So it's amazing to hear that at 4 years old, you had that realization that no one's coming to save you. You got to take care of yourself. You're walking home through the rain as a 4-year-old. That just blows my mind, but it's just different for everyone. And we all have that baggage and upbringings, and some people are maybe more insulated or sheltered than others, and others like yourself, you came to that realization sooner than we did, right? Because I think part of the baggage on my side is like, hey, if anything didn't work out, my parents would happily take me in and give me a roof over my head and cook me dinner as long as I wanted to stay, which also gives me that comfortable feeling of like, oh, okay, if everything falls apart, I still have somewhere to go. Right. Whereas you're more probably independent your whole life of, it's all on me. No one's there for me to save me. I have to do the work. Is that kind of more or less correct?
Yeah, absolutely. No safety net. You got to figure it out. Right. And even if it was there, my belief was it's not there. And so I've always been very motivated. And again, it's not that my parents wanted to abandon me. They just, I think my mom's mother was so overly protective. She wanted to try and get us independent, but at 2, I shouldn't have to change my own diapers. That's all I'm saying.
That's a pretty impressive skill if you were able to do that at 2 years old.
Exactly.
So you had an interesting upbringing. You were very much independent from very early age. And how did that shape your future? I mean, I know we talked about this a little bit on the roundtable show that we were on together, but if you don't mind diving into the story and the traveling and how that had an impact on your financial emotions and everything like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, so I would say a couple things in growing up, because my parents were very much expecting, like it was expected that you made an A. It was expected that you get first place. It was expected. So anything less than that was a big disappointment. Right. So already I was taught that I am my accomplishments and they better be great. So I'm like doing everything I can. I've got to make sure I was an intern in Congress and I did this and I was like, making sure I hit all my marks.
Yeah.
But I was doing it out of fear. Right. And and so often I would land and everybody was like, great job. And I'm like, I just got really lucky. I don't know how that happened. I got to keep it. So there was still this fear. I couldn't relax because I didn't know what I was doing. It just seemed to people seemed to thinking I was doing it. And, but in my mind, I'm like, it's a fail. It's a fail. It's a fail. So very, very fear-based in trying to make sure that my value could be seen in all my accomplishments. What was interesting, I started traveling, but even the first time a friend of mine said, hey, do you want to go to Athens and run the marathon, the original marathon? And I'm like, I can't go. And they're like, why not? Only rich people travel. They were like, what? And I'm like, only rich people travel across the sea.
Right.
He's like, you have money in the bank. You're allowed to leave. You have a passport. Oh, so that was that was huge. When I got there, I'm like, oh my God, they don't have US dollars. And
what do I do?
It was very scary because I had this limiting belief that only rich people travel. And since then, of course, I've traveled incredibly all over the world. And I love going to developing countries because what it's really taught me is to really be grateful for what I have. And it really sees me how much abundance that we have in this country, even when we're all laying around complaining or, I don't have a newer iPhone and my car's a year old. There are people that are walking and they're just happy to have a bucket of water to rinse. So
they may not even have shoes.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I've been really fortunate to undo the piece that I am my accomplishments, although that still does creep in once in a while.
Right.
That comes in and goes, no, you got to do more. But for the most part, I've really let that go and just worked on trying to be the best version of myself.
I think that's something that a lot of high achievers suffer with. I mean, you already had high expectations of it's got to be an A, you got to do everything right the first time, otherwise it's not enough. And I noticed that so many friends that I had who had such very, strict expectations on them, I got plenty of B's and C's, and my parents never locked me in the closet, or I never got grounded over it or anything like that, right? But I had the friends who would be so hard on themselves if they got a B plus, like they would freak out. They'd be depressed. And I'm the person who got like the 45 on the test and had to drop a class. And I felt totally comfortable with failing early on for some reason. And so it's interesting just to see the high achievers constantly. You hit your mark, you knock it out of the park, and for some reason it's still hard to celebrate because it's not enough. What's the next thing, right? You're looking at the next milestone that you want to achieve. Yeah. So it takes time and practice to celebrate the wins, take a step back, and actually pat ourselves on the back. Do you still find, you said you still struggle with that now sometimes?
Occasionally. And I think a lot less now that I'm really aware of it. I was, mortified when I realized how tied I was to it. And, I was like, oh, I'm not that. Yeah, I'm very tied to that.
Right.
And in that place, it was very stressful because you don't get to relax. Because even when I would do something that I was like, this is, all my friends are like, that's amazing. My mom would be like, I'm sure there's somebody that could have done it faster. I'm sure that somebody could have gotten to it sooner. And so there was this like, oh my God, there's always somebody who's going to beat me. So even when I build the pyramids,
what's the point? Right.
Yeah. Somebody built it 2 feet higher.
And that may just have been something, that your mom had grown up with too. I just think about it as my ex-girlfriend in college. She just seemed to always point out what went wrong instead of what went right. And I felt the negativity sometimes where she would attract it to herself almost like, she got a speeding ticket, failed a test, and something else happened all in 1 week. And she's like, everything bad always happens to me. I'm like, whoa, okay, this isn't going to work out very well because you're just kind of draining my vibe a little bit, right? So sometimes it just takes reframing and letting people know, hey, let's look at the glass half full. And of course, if you're raised like that, I mean, that's all your mom may have known, right? So now you knew that and you grew up with that. And so it's just, how did you deal with that? I mean, did you ever push back or say, Mom, like this is good, I did a great job? Or I'm just curious.
It took me a while. And then so one of my big self-sabotages was when my parents got divorced and I was in high school and I was on track to be a lawyer. I was like, I had it all planned out since I was like 8, of course, maybe at 7. And my mom, whether it was joking, whether it was just in conversation, she said, well, you have to be really successful so that me and your siblings can have the life we deserve. I have 4 siblings. And I thought, I'm not funding 5 other people.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? So I purposely, whenever I would have success and financial success, I would hand off my money so that when my mom asked for money, I'd say, I don't have any.
Yeah.
Because my mom was bad with money. And so I was like, I'm not taking that on. I'm not funding all my siblings and my mom. If they want something, they can do it themselves. But I couldn't say that for a while. So I had to learn to be able to set boundaries and say, yeah, I really hear that you would like that. And I hope you can feel your grief because I'm not going to be doing that and unless I choose to, but not because I'm obligated or I feel guilty. And Absolutely. It was a little bit of an adjustment, Yeah, my mom, I don't think really liked that in the beginning, but I think then she also respected that I was standing on my own 2 feet and saying, I get to decide, and not in a mean way and not without compassion, but that I actually get to decide what works for me.
And that's the most confusing thing that I see, because I hear this all the time as well. Well, how do you get rid of negative people or reduce your time around them if they're family? I can't do that to my family. And well, really you can. You have to set those boundaries, like you said, because for your own good, you need to limit the interaction or at least set the rules of, hey, I can't fund you and all my siblings. It's just, I probably could, but it's not something that I'm going to do, because that's just where I draw the line. Right. And so you set the expectations, and of course that people start to get more comfortable as you do that. And this goes for anything. I do this with clients sometimes, like, hey, okay, you may have texted me at 4 a.m. when you woke up, but I ain't texting you till 7 after I do my morning routine, because I wake up a little later. Right. So boundaries are very important, I would imagine, in creating rules for yourself as well.
They are. And, I would say this, and I'm not saying everybody should go out and shun their families.
No, definitely not.
There's a way to do it with compassion, but I will say this, and I haven't shared this a lot, but it is very true. I basically told my mom, I'm actually going to be cutting you out of my life for the next couple of years. I don't know when I'm going to get back to you, but I would appreciate it if you don't write me, don't call me, I need a break because I can't separate the mother of my childhood from the person you are today. And because I can't separate them, I need some space. And she was, of course, mortified. She thought I was never going to talk to her again. And, and I just said, look, I need some space. And when I do come back into your life, I need you to be a little nicer to me. I love you, but I also want to be around people that are nice to me. And, that was it was really hard for her. It was hard for me. But in the long run, it really, really helped me solidify those boundaries and made it really clear that I wasn't going to tolerate negativity. You get to do whatever you want, but I'm not going to be around it.
That's it. That's what you said right there is how, for anyone listening, if you have that family member or, even a spouse or something, you got to draw those boundaries, set boundaries in friendships. I mean, I've got plenty of friends where I start to realize as I started growing and they remained in that same spot, I kind of outgrew them in a way where I became overly positive and optimistic. And I looked at the possibilities instead of what could go wrong and the negative things and why the world sucks. And I had to cut or at least eliminate some of those people to some extent, maybe reduce the time around them. And so for you, it was a more difficult relationship because it was your mother and that's your family versus a friend who you can maybe just ignore their call or get back to them late, right? So I love that you were able to step up and actually set that for yourself because you understood that, hey, this doesn't mean I don't love you, Mom. I just need space to create my own life and figure things out for myself and set those boundaries, which of course it sounds like she respected. It may have hurt at the beginning, but she ended up respecting you for that more.
Yeah. And we have a much more authentic and real relationship now.
Right.
And when she plays a game, I can say, wow, this feels like a game you're playing. And I'm probably not going to talk to you for a little bit. Or is there,
call it out.
I just bring it more direct. And then she's like, oh, I did
You're trying to break those patterns that she kind of starts to go back towards, right?
That's right. Break the patterns, or like I had this big financial event and I made a chunk of money and she's like, I don't remember how much you told me that you got. And I said, I didn't tell you because it's none of your business, but thank you for checking.
Right.
She was like, oh, I guess he's not going to tell me. Here's the thing I would say to people out there. Just like you're saying, some of your friends, you sort of had to say, I need to cut ties or move on. When I got my CPA license, my boss said to me, look, you're going to have to leave some of your friends behind as you get more successful. Just some people aren't going to fit into your life. And I'm like, you're wrong. I had a belief that I had to bring everybody with me. I thought that no, everybody wants to come and everybody wants to be a better version and everybody wants to have real conversations that are uncomfortable so we can all be the best. No, they don't.
Right.
Not everybody wants that. And to finally realize that I can't bring everybody along, even if I want to, I can still feel the but I want to bring these. It's not their journey. It's we're all on our own journeys and we have to go at our pace and not everybody's coming with us.
Definitely. The quote that I think of is you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, or even you can't want it for someone more than they do, right? You might want them to be successful so bad, but unless they have that inner fire and desire to take the steps and actions necessary, I mean, it's just so frustrating when you're trying to help people out who don't want to help themselves and they have all the tools and resources available. And you're so right that it's just so draining in a way when you're trying to bring all these people up and they just aren't really interested in joining you. It's sometimes easier to not let them go entirely, but just, hey, we're all on our own journey. I'm going to focus on me. And when you get better, you set the example for others, and maybe that'll light that spark within them to step it up and start to improve themselves, which I found another thing. I know I'm kind of going on tangents here, but it's being a lighthouse where people are seeing your beam and they're attracted to you and they want to be like you. You're not trying to be the tugboat that's pulling everyone into success. They got to look at your light and follow that for themselves if that's what they truly want.
Yeah. And I believe that you just have to trust that. Like,
Absolutely.
I'm not running around telling everybody, hey, here's how you can have a better life. Hey, do you want to have a better life? Hey, I'm not like trying to recruit. Right. But when somebody genuinely comes up to me and says, hey, your life seems to be pretty good. Like, you've got some properties, you've traveled a lot, you've done these things. Hey, how do you do that? Like, what's your perspective on all this? Then I'm happy to share it, but I'm not running around going, oh, you got to know what I do. Oh, like, here's this. Like, no, I'm doing my thing. And if somebody sees that light and wants to check in, I'm happy to share, but I don't need to.
Exactly. So you're not trying to just share for the sake of sharing. You are willing to share if people ask. And when it's such a good feeling when people actually approach you, because it shows that what you're doing is working. You are setting an example. You're inspiring others to at least message you or take the time to give you a call and ask how you're doing it. And of course, they've got a whole journey and a lot of work to do to actually get to where you are in most cases. And so many times it's so frustrating. You give people the piece of advice, you give them what they need to know, you check in with them, they didn't do anything with it, right? So it's really got to be that internal thing. Again, you can't want it more for someone than they do. So do you have any advice or suggestions? I mean, how have you found a way to help others? I mean, do they really have to just help themselves, or are you able to coach them or hold them to that standard?
Yeah. So, when I work with people, so people do come to me, I do coach people. Some people come to me through my accounting practice. Other people come to me because I teach workshops, or somebody has worked with me and refers me out. What I try to do is really create a space of curiosity and a place that feels safe for them to share everything, and not be judging them. Oh my God, that was so stupid. Why would you do that? It's sort of like, oh, okay. Wow, that's interesting. That's so interesting that you have continued to do this, even though you're aware that you're doing it. Wow, I wonder what's the payoff there, and what's it costing your soul, right? And so I really try to create the space where I help them discover. I use stories, and so sometimes I'll tell a story, and they'll halfway through go, "That's me." I'm like, really? Oh, I guess there's a connection there. I was just telling this other story. They're like, But I use humor as a way to lighten it up a little bit so that people aren't like, taking themselves out on a regular basis. But I think if you can find people that can hold space for you and not judge you for the mistakes, just like you were saying, your parents didn't shame you for like, oh my God, you made a B, you're evil. That's the kind of space we need to be able to fail. We need to be able to make mistakes. I'll have clients say to me, you must hate me. You must be judging me. And no, I'm in these, I can sit here with you because I've made all the same mistakes. It's just a lot of my associates will pretend like they didn't.
Right.
I didn't start investing when I was 5. I didn't have a savings plan when I was 21. I didn't buy a house when I was 23. No, I didn't do all those. I did everything wrong. But I can have more compassion because I understand like the struggle.
And what you said there about the stories, how you like to tie humor, that helps lessen the blow of maybe the moral of the story. They don't feel as attacked. No one likes to hear what they've done wrong. And I love that you also said you make it relatable, because it's so true. So many people act like, oh, I've never made mistakes. They just showcase all the wins. But when you're showcasing the losses and the struggles, and you struggled with money, and you would always obliterate your savings account because your mom was going to ask how much you had.
That's
and
right.
So you went through all those things that so many of us also went through, which makes it more relatable. It makes it seem more like, oh, you're a real person. You're not this pie in the sky investor who started investing in 4th grade or 5th grade.
Yeah.
Or when you were 4 or 5, rather.
Exactly. Well, and it's interesting. I've been working out at this gym recently. I went back to boot camp, which is great. But some of the folks in there are like, oh, you know what? I built a boat the other day, and then I'm doing this, and then I'm like building gold bars, and wow, Bob, you're so quiet. Like, I'm efficient with my words. I can talk a lot, but I no longer need everybody to know, like, validate me. Guess what? I did this. And, I have this title. And like, people for years didn't know I was CFO of the Comedy Store because I was also doing comedy. I didn't want anybody to like treat me different. So people are like, what? You run the, I'm like, like, earlier in my life, I probably needed the validation.
Yeah.
But I see so many people and I know it's just insecurity that they're just talking, looking amazing. I'm amazing. I'm like, you're amazing. Good for you.
That's something I've had to work on too. I mean, my brothers and I are all like this, right? I don't know what it is. We're all competitive, but someone will be sharing a story and someone wants to top that story, or, oh, I did it better, or I have a cooler story or experience.
Yeah.
And it finally started happening where I think I got to that point that you're talking about of, let me let them talk. I'm just going to listen and I won't say anything unless I'm asked. And it's almost freeing. Like you said, you don't feel like you have to brag about all the things that you've done to validate. And so even my girlfriend's giving me props because she called me out on this a few times. Like, hey, you're always controlling the conversation and you're over talking and talking about all the things that you've done instead of letting others talk. And so I think having that constructive criticism has made me more aware. So now I kind of hold back a little more, and it's valuable because you get to learn so much about other people, their struggles, their stories, instead of constantly trying to like jump in and share how you had a similar experience or, oh, I did something like that too. Just let them talk, let them finish their thought. It empowers you to be able to do what you want to do without having to feel like, oh, I don't want them to know I'm the CFO and they're going to think of me differently. No, you're just Bob. You're the guy at the comedy club. You're also cracking jokes. They appreciate that. They don't need to feel like you're someone out of reach, like you mentioned earlier.
Exactly, because I think we do put so many labels and emphasis on labels. Like we give it so much power.
Titles too, yeah.
And at the end of the day, like we all have to eat a couple of meals and do our business and maybe take a shower.
Every now and then.
Like we're not semi-gods and gods and serfs. So yeah, I think it's great to be able to listen. And I know in my family, everybody was just taking a breath, waiting for somebody else to take a breath so they could jump in. And it's so exhausting. It's like Olympic conversation because like everybody's trying to I'm just sort of like what you're saying with your brothers. And sometimes it's just amazing to just sit back and let everybody else. Whew, cool.
I'm sure you find this too. It helps if you do a lot of podcasts in a day, because if you do 3 or 4 and you talk for 4 hours, you don't want to talk much after that.
Exactly.
So it could be good advice for anyone listening. If you got a conversation or a dinner coming up, set up 3 podcast interviews for that day and you'll be a lot more quiet. Just because you'll probably lose your voice slightly.
Well, I think one of the things we don't learn these days is active listening, how to actually listen to people.
Yeah.
Instead of like, wow, I really heard that was hard. Oh, you think that was hard? I got something that was even harder, right? We don't just go, wow, that sounds really difficult. That sounds like you really had to struggle. Man, my heart goes out to you, right? Instead of like, wait, let me think. I have a better story. And so I think really one of the things that I do in a lot of workshops and with people one-on-one is coach them through difficult conversations, like how to set a boundary, how to ask for a raise, because a lot of us just don't know how to have those difficult conversations. We don't have a lot of experience, and most people run from them. And so the more that we can learn, and I was terrified of conversations and confrontation. So it took some work, but I think that's a skill that can be learned is 1, how to listen, and then 2, how to have a difficult conversation so that it doesn't just get amped up into a fight.
Definitely. So how would you suggest that someone at least approaches something confrontational? Maybe if you're telling someone to stop doing something, or how would you suggest we go about that? I'm just curious.
So what I would do is and this is what I did. This is what I used to do. I would get a friend to role play with me. And I would say, look, I've got this situation coming up and I need to ask for a raise. I'm terrified. Can you role play it with me? My boss yells a lot. He throws things and I had some violent bosses, and we worked it out and we role played it. But I role play both parts. I role play me, and then I role play the other person. So so when they're saying, "Oh, I deserve it," no, you don't. Like I know both. Like I know what I think he's going to say, right? And so practicing that multiple times, and then I had this tip of, and then when you actually do it, go in with the mindset that it's going to go amazing. Because even if it goes to crap, you went in without the anxiety because you'd already told yourself it was going to be amazing.
So you'll perform better, and you'll probably ask kinder questions in a nicer tone.
Yeah. And then afterwards you can clean up the mess if it didn't go so well. But at least you got in the door, you didn't die, you didn't hyperventilate. And I think that's such a skill set that's so important. I work with people that are always looking for investors. Like, I've got this big project and I want to raise $1 million. And so in a large workshop, I'll say, "Oh, that's great. Why don't you pitch? Why don't you pitch to us like we're the investors?" They're like, "That would be great."
Yeah, that investor is not going to invest if you present like that. That's for sure.
But you might have a few points you need to work on. They're like, my God, I thought I could just wing it. No, you got to work on this stuff.
Absolutely. I just had a conversation with another podcast guest recently, and I think it was about sales. And we were talking about how come we think that we don't need to practice scripts and things like that when, Michael Jordan or all the greats in the athletes, they practice hours every single day at their craft, and we think we could just roll up to a client and sell them without any practice at all. It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And so we got to practice whatever it is that we want to do. We've got to practice. And so you said you would do role play with a friend, and you'd have that conversation in your mind before you actually had it, which is a lot more helpful than rolling up in there and being like, "I hope this goes well."
Crapshoot.
Right. 50-50. And the anxiety piece too. If you go in there feeling hopeful and optimistic that it's going to go well, like we talked about a few minutes ago, you're going to have a more positive conversation, most likely, instead of automatically being closed up and anxious from the get-go.
Yeah. And not everybody's going to be on board. That's okay. Like, you still need to do it for yourself. And
right.
I just, I remember I went in and asked for a raise one time early on. And I went to my boss and I said, "Look, I need a raise because, my housing is this much and there's this, and this, and here's all the justifications why." And he looked at me and said, "There's no way I'm going to give you a raise based on what you need. But here's what I am going to do. I am going to double your salary based on your value of what you bring to the company." And I was like, I could use that. My value.
That's what really matters. Yeah.
Very grateful to him for really reframing that for me, because I thought it was so important that I was just basing my salary on what do I need just to scrape by, instead of what's my value? What do I bring to this company? What's my worth?
Definitely. And that goes with clients and everything too, because I work in the real estate game, and commissions and negotiating concessions always comes up, like, "Hey, will you cut your commission?" And I'm like, "No, that's not part of the negotiation. I will bring you way more value than me cutting my commission by 1 or 2 points will do for you, because then that just makes me less money and I'm still going to get you an amazing result. So let's focus on the results, not the expenses," for example. And so that's what your boss did with you.
Yeah.
Instead of focusing on your needs to scrape by and what the bare minimum is, or your payments on your mortgage or all those things, he focused on the value you're bringing to the company and use that to justify the pay increase, which is, it almost seems like obvious in hindsight, but during the conversation, it doesn't seem like something that you really have to look at that much until your eyes are open to that fact.
Absolutely. I think so many of us don't advocate for ourselves. We are not our best cheerleaders.
True.
And we're thinking, what's the minimum I can get by with? What's the least I can ask for what's the most I can ask for without getting too much pushback? Yeah. Let me find, like, what's going to be the least uncomfortable, instead of, I'm going to be uncomfortable. I'm going to name it. I'm going to put it out there. I might get a rejection. I might get a total thumbs up. And so for me, that was something. My parents were not good at advocating for themselves. Consequently, I had to learn that skill.
Absolutely. So how have you started to learn that skill throughout your lifetime? I mean, did you start reading books and getting mentors or coached or lessons like with your boss? Was it just a combination, or were you really intentional about, I need to get better at this thing, let me go to this resource to learn?
Well, I started doing workshops, any kind of self-help, self-improvement, leadership stuff. I got a therapist and was like, I really need to learn how. I'm terrified of conversations. Like, for a long time, I was very incapable of being in a group of people unless I was on stage or with my family. But other than that, I was terrified to be in groups of people. But, I just kept challenging myself. And I remember I did this workshop, and it was a leadership workshop, and I was not a leader in my mind. And so we did this whole thing. And after the weekend, we found out that they had filmed the whole weekend.
And you didn't even know.
And we didn't even know, right? And so I'm watching this and oh my God, I was the one that like we had a choice. We could go to lunch or we could stay an extra hour and finish the project to our liking. And I convinced everybody to stay because I thought we had a crappy thing. And everybody stayed and we ended up staying for 2 hours. And then there was this other and I'm like,
I'm a leader.
I never step up. Oh my God, are people annoyed with me? Because gosh, I'm sort of bossy, you know. But it was really great to like watch me for the whole weekend without knowing I was watching me until afterwards to really see like, oh wow, okay, I do step up. And even though in spite of myself thinking that I don't have all these skills, I clearly have been utilizing these skills. And another workshop I was at, they were like, Bob, you're going to be in charge of the whole thing of 20 people. And we had to do this big thing. And I said, why would you want me to be in charge? I'm a control freak. And one of the women said to me, who said that was a bad thing? And I'm like,
so what? Reframed that. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of reframing.
Reframing is very powerful because like we talked about earlier, being negative, you can always look at it glass half full, glass half empty. And which way are you going to look at it? Because this happened the other day. It rained out here and I'm like, oh, I hate the rain. It's so ugly. I don't feel like leaving the house. I get wet on the way to the car. And I reframed it. And I said, well, I love when it's sunny and it's beautiful and it's green outside and the trees and the flowers are everywhere. And of course, it can't always just be like that. They need rain to be able to have those sunny, beautiful days. And so I caught myself in a moment of negativity as well. And I reframed and said, okay, let's look at the positives here, because oftentimes, even if a business partner takes money from you or a client, fires you and you don't get paid on a certain job that you did, you can always find something positive in that. And I guess as long as we're waking up every single day, we have another shot to make things better. And that's the power of reframing. And control freak, instead of saying that's always a bad thing, you could reframe that and say you're very detail oriented, you're very organized. Totally different sound.
Yeah. And the other thing is too, once I kept hearing, I sort of knew I was a control freak. I just didn't own it completely. I sort of knew. But when other people started looking at that, saying that's a positive thing, when people would ask me to be in charge, I knew, and I would say, look, I tend to, if I'm going to call the shots and I might hurt your feelings. And they're like,
we need that. Yeah.
So then I was able to just make sure that I had consensus that people this is the way I work. And yes, I will get this thing done. I will put on blinders. We will finish this. And I realized that that's what a lot of people wanted because they did not have the focus or the drive. And then they knew I did. And so they were willing to tolerate my control issues because they know I would get the job done.
I love that. So you were able to embrace it more in the future because you knew that even though you thought that it was this negative thing, a lot of people need that person to reel them in and keep them focused and have the blinders on to actually get the work done. And it's something that we all have these stories that we tell ourselves, good or bad. And sometimes it just takes those experiences or reframing for us to step into that or to own that position. Like you said, oh, I'm not a leader. And then you saw yourself and then you realized, oh my gosh, look, I'm leading. I'm a leader. I'm a leader now. So any advice or suggestions on how to successfully reframe? Because so many times we're stuck in these patterns and stories and we may not even know, right? Like you're obviously very self-aware now, but what about for that person who's listening who has no idea that they're running these patterns and software programs in their mind?
Yeah. So I think journaling is a really amazing thing to do. Just taking stock of things. Wow, I noticed today I'm really angry at everybody at work, or everybody else seems to get ahead of me, or whatever those observations are, I would start to write them down. And then if I'm aware that gosh, everybody keeps telling me I'm so negative, what's the negative pleasure I'm getting out of being so negative? What do I get to do? Why do I enjoy being the Debbie Downer? Why do I enjoy bringing everybody's energy down? What is that? And then start to just look at that. And then as you're writing about all those things, what are some of the positive pieces of that? What are the, how could it be positive? Well, nobody yelled at me because I was quiet, or start to try and find the positivity, the gratitude, the good pieces of something, and then just write it down so that you can start to hiccup, is what I like to call it, hiccup the brain, so that when you're starting to go, oh my God, it's rain, Oh, cool. There's going to be water for the
Yes.
plants. So if we can hiccup that pattern and interrupt it, is the way for me to get to my reframing.
Pattern interrupts. I've heard of that on several podcasts and in books. And that's the thing. You catch yourself, and journaling is huge for this. I do it all the time where you're just writing down how you feel, what's going well, what's annoying you, what are you not happy about. And as you reviewing your journals is also very helpful for those listening. I'll kind of go back maybe after 6 months of journaling. I'll read all 6 months and see, what did I learn? What was I struggling with? What am I still struggling with that I need to work on? What are some ideas that I had that maybe I kind of forgot about that I'd like to bring back to the surface? And you catch yourself. The hiccup, the pattern interrupt is what causes us to be able to change the habit. Instead of running those patterns and programs on autopilot, we stop it, we interrupt it, and we switch it out for the emotion that we actually want to have.
Yeah. And for people that say, I'm a terrible journaler, I don't like to do it, I don't know what to say, there's a great book, The Artist's Way. And basically you write 3 pages. And so sometimes I would just write blah, 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 blah. I do not blah, 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 run to write, blah, 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 blah,
to fill in the 3 pages.
And
I had a hard time doing the 3 pages too. I read that book as well.
Yeah. But it was a great way because it would help flush out the garbage. Just, all the blah, blah, blah. And
it forces you to fill the page with thoughts and ideas and go deeper on something as well.
Yeah. So there are many ways to do it, but I find that journaling is really powerful. And like you said, you can look back and see how far you've come, and continue to make adjustments. But if we don't interrupt that thought process, that habit, one of the things that I do when I do workshops, first thing is, who wants to be rich?
Everybody.
Me. Everybody's like, I want to be rich. And then I'll follow it up right in the middle of the energy, and I'll say, and who deserves it? Right. And then all of a sudden everybody's like, and their hand comes down. And they're like, oh shit.
Right.
That's the voice I'm interested in, because that's the voice that's taking me out.
Absolutely. Interesting. I love that. And in the hand raising, that always helps. Everyone's hands are up and then it goes down because they feel like they don't deserve it. And then you can dig into, well, how is your relationship with money? Why do you feel like you don't deserve it? Because that feeling is going to lead to you sabotaging it. Whenever you do get it, you're going to find a way to get rid of it or lose it. So there's so many things we got to work on. How would you suggest, how do we work those financial muscles of getting used to getting more money, earning more money, keeping more money?
So, one of the things that I would really recommend is people start looking at their bank accounts on a daily basis. Not just to see if you're overdrawn, but just actually looking at it to see that you got money in it, and getting comfortable with seeing it. Because one of the things that I've noticed is when a client inherits some money, when a windfall comes through, they immediately spend and get that money out of their bank account to get right back to their comfort level. Right. And so, when I was younger, I was comfortable if I wasn't overdrawn. Now I'm like, oh my God, there's only 20,000 in the bank account. I'm freaking out. Right. So my level of comfort, I've raised the bar.
Right.
And so one of the ways you can do that is if you inherit some money, if you get a raise, put the money in the bank and just let it sit there for 4 weeks. Like, don't go out and wait, I'm going to pay off my credit card. I'm going to do. That's great that you're going to do those things, but how about let it sit in your bank account and say, hey, sit in my bank account for a little bit. Talk to some of your friends, get them to come sit in my bank account, right? I talk to my money. Like, I have humorous conversations with my money. And I encourage my clients to go online or talk to the money in their wallet, to just start to normalize that, like, it's okay to have the money. It doesn't need to come out of the wallet. It doesn't need to come out of the bank account, and learn to tolerate having more than you thought you deserve.
It's a very powerful exercise. I did that recently with a commission check, and I deposited the amount in the bank account, but I also withdrew $500 just to keep it in my wallet. I hate carrying cash. I don't even carry a wallet. Honestly, I have my cell phone has a little case for my cards, and I just keep like a license, a debit card, and a credit card. That's it. And maybe my concealed handgun license if I'm carrying that day. But the thing that happened was I got comfortable with, oh, this feels nice seeing $100 crisp bills, and I can like smell the money and feel it and get comfortable with it. And it's so powerful to start getting used to seeing the money. And like you said, talking to it, hey, go out there, make more friends, bring them back. It's almost like a game at that point, instead of thinking like, oh, I need to stay at this level. It's wondering, how do I continue to multiply this so that I can do more fun things, have more freedom for my family, go to that nice restaurant, go on that amazing vacation. Those things that we feel like we don't deserve or we can't afford, we keep putting it off until sometime in the future. Whereas if we get more comfortable today and learn how to multiply the money, we can actually enjoy that instead of putting it off until some retirement down the road that may never happen.
Yeah. And why not start having pleasure now? Why not start having fun now? Like, instead of like, oh my God, I've got to pay for my $10,000 vacation. Oh my God, I can pay for a $10,000 vacation.
I love that.
Freaking how awesome is that? It's not on my credit card. Like, find joy in that stuff. Like, instead of at least in my family, making money and keeping it and spending it was all painful. And like, there was no joy every time I'm like, oh, I had to buy a new car. Oh, I had to go,
fix this.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Right.
I got the money.
That goes back to reframing. Instead of I have to do this, I know Tony Robbins gets attributed for saying this. Instead of saying I have to do this thing, I have to do that, I get to. It changes everything. You're fortunate. You have the problem. I mean, we have the first world problems every day. Oh, I get to go change the oil on my car because I have a car, and I get to get new shoes because I own shoes and clothes and, all the fancy watches and all those things that, like you said, the third world countries in many places, they don't have cars. They're walking in many cases. They're taking the bus. They're wearing the same pair of shoes for years that have holes in them. I mean, I've seen it too. I've been to India. My dad's from India. Mom's from Mexico, which probably also impacted their money beliefs to some extent. And that kind of got passed down to me. And so learning how to reframe things and also get around those examples of people of, wow, that person's great with money. They attract money. They're comfortable with it. This is a different feeling than I ever had growing up with my family, for example, right? They're not blurring out the prices on the menu. Like, they're not blurring out the food on the menu, looking at the prices. They're blurring out the prices and actually getting what they want on the menu, which I had always grown up blurring out the things on the menu and looking at, okay, what's like $15 or $10 instead of what's that thing that I really want? Oh, it's a $56 plate. Okay, let's get it. That's a totally different way of looking at it. Any suggestions on how to flex those muscles and get surrounded with wealth and understanding, hey, this is where I want to be. I need to be comfortable with this.
Yeah. It's funny because as you were just saying that, it reminds me of a story, but I think early on, I must have had some instinct about push through it anyway, even if there's consequence, right? Even if it's uncomfortable. My parents, if my grandparents took us out for a meal, we couldn't get anything more than $6. Like, we had to just get a hamburger, basically.
Yeah.
And that's it. A hamburger. And water. And I freaking love shrimp, right? And there was just like $15 shrimp platter. And my grandparents were like, whatever you want. And my mom's looking at us going,
don't do it.
And I go, I'm going to have the shrimp. Now, I loved every bite. I got punished later on. But here's the thing. I was willing. It was worth it. And so for people out there that want to have success, they want to have more financial abundance, like, not everybody's going to like you. Not everybody's going to be thrilled for you. Some people are going to ask you for some of that money or tell you that you don't deserve it and you should give it to them. Like, be okay with that. And say, wow, I really hear you. I'm really sorry that you don't have that money. I'm not in a place to share all of it. And I'm okay with that. And I wish you well. Like, we can do these things with compassion, but if we can't learn to get comfortable with our success, if we can't get comfortable stepping into leadership, if we can't get comfortable setting boundaries, it's going to be a hard road. And so learning how to push back a little bit, know there might be repercussions, do it anyway, and find people that will support you and tell you that they love you. When I was doing stand-up comedy in the beginning, I was like, what if everybody hates me? Well, I always bring a friend so that if everybody hated me, I at least had a friend that goes, well, you weren't that funny, but I love you. Cool. Sweet. Right.
Awesome. Yeah.
So like, getting support on the things that are scary for you. So, because like, some things we don't have to do everything by ourselves. But we have to push past our comfort level.
Lots of lessons there. I know growth happens when we get uncomfortable, but also having a friend in your corner instead of having that negative Nancy all the time who you wouldn't want to take them because if you did bad, they would tell you like, you should just give up. You're never going to be successful. Yeah. You never go back on the stage again versus having that friend who's like, okay, that was a super corny joke you cracked, but okay, I laughed at this other one. At least you have some sort of support. And that goes back to what we spoke about earlier, the power of who you surround yourself with and how it's okay if you outgrow certain friends or even family members. You don't have to bring everyone up. You don't have to save everyone. And more importantly, I've heard this as well. You don't have to attend every battle you're invited to or something like that. Like people want to fight all the time about stuff and complain. Well, you don't have to participate. You can just choose your battles wisely. You're not obligated to engage if someone's making a bad comment about you or trying to pull you in on a conversation that you're just not even interested in. That way you can focus on those higher level, higher energy conversations that light you up and motivate you. So lots of lessons here. I mean, this is all the self-development, personal development journey goes so close hand in hand to financial responsibility and understanding you are worthy to make more money. I don't know if you've ever read the book. Have you ever read that book, You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero, I think?
No, I've heard about it, but I should probably read it.
Yeah, so that's a great book, but I also realized that there's another book from her that's called You Are a Badass at Making Money, and that one is specifically about the beliefs around you can make money, you're very good at it, you attract it, it comes to you, you keep it, it grows. Those are all beliefs and affirmations that I believe people should start to repeat to themselves and actually truly believe. Because if you don't, like you said, subconsciously, you get a $10,000 real estate commission. I better pay all those credit cards off. Well, I'm back to $2,000 in the bank account again, right? You're always stuck in that pattern of what you're comfortable with. So learning how to expand and how do we get comfortable with 200,000 in the bank or 2 million?
Exactly. And to your point about affirmations, I think they're awesome. And there's a couple of things that like I've done workshops with New Thought folks and different things. And they're like, you just do an affirmation and then the Mercedes shows up under your pillow. No, you still actually have to do some work. Like you actually have to, right? You gotta be proactive in your success.
Right.
And even if it sounds stupid and feels stupid, like just keep saying it. Like I'm great with money until you actually feel it. Like you can go, I'm great with money. I'm great with money. I'm not great with money. I'm great.
Yes.
Like you just keep saying it. And I go on my walks with my dog in the mornings. I spend an hour. I'm singing affirmations. I'm sure people think like, who is that?
You're crazy.
There's that crazy dude with the dog. And I am just like, I'm worthy, abundance, like whatever those things are. And but I let it like resonate. Like I try and vibrate it into my body. Even when I'm resistant to something new, I keep saying it until it feels okay.
Yes. That's something that a friend did tell me recently as well, is that you can't just say it like, oh, I'm a millionaire. I have a Lamborghini, you have to feel it. I am a millionaire. I am a money magnet. You have to truly believe it. And that emotion goes down to your cellular level where you truly believe it. That's when it's going to actually happen. Not if you don't just magically say it, I have $1 million in the bank account, tap your toes and tomorrow it happens.
Right.
There's also work involved, but when you're doing the work and you're going through the daily stuff, if you truly believe it to your core that you are on the path, you're going to approach that thing a lot differently than if you don't believe that it's possible for you.
Yeah. And, for me, I'll tell you something that was interesting. And, I have clients that are, this client made $1.5 million and this client has 2 houses. And I'm like, oh my God, that client made 1.5 and they've got this and that. And this person had that. And then I stopped and went, oh, I make that. I have a rental property. Like, so here I am making them like
larger than life.
I'm like, oh my God. And, actually,
wait a second.
I'm actually
like
doing
me.
better than that. Right? But in my internal self,
you're telling yourself that you don't have what they have.
I don't have it. I'm never going to make that kind of money. I'm actually doing a lot better if I'm being competitive. Right. But but it was amazing to me how unconscious I was of the successes that I was having. I was just doing things and I certainly had goals, but I wasn't like, oh my God, I got to get to this number. But it was really interesting to realize, oh my God, I've done pretty well. but internally I'm like, you got to do more. But that I think goes back to that old, you are your accomplishments. There's always one more thing to do and you got to do it faster. So that track was playing in the background. So I replaced the track. I
love that. So you replace the track, reframing, pattern interrupts, affirmations, all these different tools that we have to continuously rely on to improve ourselves. I think that's the path towards that. And then also journaling is another very helpful tool for understanding these patterns and these thoughts that we have that constantly, every single day, our mind's just racing. I can't remember how many thoughts, like 50,000 or 70,000 thoughts a day or something 50, crazy 60, like 70, that.
Yeah.
It never ends. But when we take time to actually sit down and write down, oh, this is how I'm feeling. And why do I feel this way? Oh, because my mom did this when I grew up. And you start to dig into those things, become more aware, which in turn impacts the way you show up in the future. When that thought comes into your mind again, you're able to catch it instead of just running that program on autopilot. Wait, hold on a second. I am worthy. I deserve this money. I'm going to keep it in the bank account a few more days and just get used to having more money instead of immediately paying down bills.
Yeah.
These are all great habits. And I started to do this as well. So I think I'm well on the path, but
yeah,
a lot of what we talked about today is very beneficial for those who haven't started this journey or still feel like they're self-sabotaging every time they see a little bit of success.
Yeah.
Super powerful stuff. So are there any tips or tidbits that we missed, or we covered a whole slew of options for those trying to get better in their financial life?
The one thing I would say that we didn't talk about, two things. One, move towards what you're afraid of. Move towards your fears. That has been my mantra through my life. Whatever terrified me, I learned martial arts. I learned how to speak in public. Everything that scared me, I was like, that's where I'm going next.
Awesome.
And so I really encourage people to move towards your fears because it's liberating. And then the other thing is to actually be compassionate with yourself and just get really curious. Wow, isn't that interesting? I say I want success and I keep it from myself. I keep eluding it. And so to be really curious with yourself so that you can have compassion and empathy to say, wow, isn't that interesting? I really say I want this and yet I'm not there. And so I would say those two pieces: move towards your fears and be really curious with yourself and remove judgment.
Thank you for sharing that, Bob. And then also you mentioned earlier a therapist. You had a therapist for some time. I'm not sure if you see one now. I meet with mine every 2 weeks, and it's helpful just to have that neutral third-party person because those questions, your second point, it is helpful to ask yourself those questions, but so many times people don't even take the time to say, oh, that's interesting. Whereas having that person to talk to, you'll explain all these things like we're talking here, and they'll ask those questions. Well, hey, tell me a little bit about that. Why do you feel that way? Or why do you think it is that you believe this thing about money? And they'll bring up those questions that maybe we may not know to ask ourselves.
Yeah.
And I found that very helpful for just learning more about myself, how I think, how I operate. So very good points there. And where can our audience go to connect with you, to learn more about you, to listen to your podcast, Bob?
Absolutely. They can find me at themoneynerve.com. That's nerve, hit a nerve, not a nerd. I'm a nerd, but it's themoneynerve.com.
Awesome. Themoneynerve.com. And they can find everything, all your podcasts, your social media,
our blogs, all that stuff, how to reach out to me, workshops, all that good stuff.
Perfect.
Book. Yeah.
In your book and everything as well. Awesome. Mm-hmm. Well, Bob, I really enjoyed getting to share your message and your story and your money thoughts, or I guess what's the right word, the money beliefs and reframing that our audience needs to have. And I'll definitely drop the show notes in the bio, in the notes for this podcast, so that everyone can reach out to you and learn more about you, grab a copy of your book, themoneynerve.com, right?
Yep, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. It's been awesome.
Awesome. Likewise, Bob. We'll be in touch. Thank you.
Sounds good.
Hey everyone, Chris Bello here. Just wanted to thank you real quick for listening to the show, whether you're listening on podcast or YouTube or wherever it is that you may be listening. I wanted to make that quick offer about real estate help. I am in the real estate business. That is my main business and how I make all my income and my living by helping others buy, sell, rent, or invest in real estate across the nation. If you have any questions at all, go to chrisbello.com/real estate. Again, that is chrisbello.com/real estate. I'd love to see if I can help you out in my markets. And maybe if you're in a market outside of the ones that I'm focusing on right now, I'd love to connect you with a real estate professional who can help fulfill whatever needs or services that you are requiring. So again, go to chrisbello.com/real estate. A great thing is when I connect you with a vetted professional, if I'm not able to help you myself, is whenever a transaction closes, I'm actually able to get a referral commission. So that can be a great way of thanking me for my content. It helps to support the show, and it helps me to continue to spend time bringing on amazing guests, doing these great interviews, spending a lot of time on creating content, and making sure that I can bring you the very best information that you need to grow professionally, emotionally, intelligently, and in every single area. We're all working on getting better at everything. And so my focus and expertise is in real estate. I'd love to be the one to help you again. If you're not interested in that, no worries at all. Please continue to listen to the show. Make sure you leave a review. It helps so much in getting new followers and sharing the message. And thank you once again for being a listener. I'll catch you on the next episode.